Bethany Barton, and I'm part of Dopamind. We go into schools, and no, I'm not showing you that yet. We go into schools, and we go into communities, and we teach people about their brains and teach kids about their brain's relationship with technology so families can make informed choices and healthy screen choices. So we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today. Does that sound awesome? Yes or yes?
Yeah.
I like to start with this quote from the Pew Research Center. They say 2/3 of parents say parenting is harder today than it was 20 years ago. Many citing technologies like social media or smartphones as a reason. So, Dopamind, what are we? We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Teach kids and caregivers how to navigate modern technology. We have video programs you can do at home or in your school. We have curriculum you can put into your school. We come in and we talk at schools and in communities. We do assemblies, we do expert panels where we bring people in from all over the country who work in this space and we get them to talk. And how did this start? Well, that's me. I'm a science communicator for kids and an award-winning author and illustrator. And that's my neighbor, Annika. She literally lives across the street from me. She's a veteran social media marketer, and she's a fancy CEO of her own marketing company. And basically, several years ago, in 2020 maybe it was 2021, we kind of realized that technology was making our kids act maybe not always the kindest. And Annika was super smart, and she went and she found a bunch of experts, and she interviewed them, and she asked them all about it, and they told her a bunch of really good stuff about it, and then she said, great, now what do I have to tell my kids this information? And they just kind of blinked at her and were like, oh, no, that's not a thing. She's like, wait, but I don't know how to explain this stuff to my kids. Like, how are people supposed to do this? And so she came to me because I am a kid's science communicator, and she said, hey, can you help me explain to my kids and your kids what all of this is? And when we started doing that, everyone who heard about it said, hey, can you tell my kids? Can you tell my kids? Can you tell my school? And we realized this was a need that people had, and we wanted to be able to fill that need and go into schools. So I am a nonfiction science communicator of picture books for Penguin Random House. I came to that through my day job in film and TV. But I do go into schools and I talk about dopamine, I talk about books. I work at the Governor's Early Literacy Foundation in Tennessee. I do a lot of stuff for early literacy. And I'm a mom. This is my little buddy, Leo. He's 12. He's the best. That's my whole family. I have a husband too. He gets ignored in these presentations. And I have a dog, which is everybody's favorite part of the whole presentation when you see how incredibly cute my dog is. That's Willow. She's elderly. Waiting is confusing to her. And then I have a brain. I think everybody here is a brain, right? Nobody here is a robot? Do we have any robots here? Okay. If you were a robot, that's cool. Sometimes I help build robots because I do work in the art department for film and TV. So the art department creates the environment for a film or a TV show. These are a bunch of the shows that I've worked on. And we read a book that doesn't have any pictures, basically a script, and then we start creating the environment. So we will draw pictures, we do a lot of math, we draw with computers, we get together and pull images or take pictures of images around and make kind of like mood boards. Sometimes we go into an existing building and we just dress the set. So this was an actual sort of office room, but we brought in all the furniture and everything in there to create the set. Sometimes the set is just a location. We just had to find a big giant desert and we called it space. Sometimes we build a miniature set. Sometimes we build a really big miniature. I like to call those bigatures. And then those are really fun to film too because they're huge. I also work in the prop department, so anything actors hold, touch, interact with, those are props. I worked on Blackish for a lot of years. The cell phone that Dre's holding, that's a prop. The controller that Jack's holding, that's a prop. And then my favorite part is when it's a prop I can't find in the real world, like this custom robot named Lovat James. I did not know how to make robots, so I got to do my favorite thing, which is research. I had to research how to build robots so I could get some robots built for our show. So I became buddies with a high school robotics team. They taught me everything I needed to know, and they helped us build Lovat James. Then I wanted to be able to build droids for Star Wars shows, so I had to go do some research, right? That's a little bit different than a high school competitive robot. So I went to the Droid Builders Club, They are a free club across the country. They are also in Green Bay. And they'll teach you everything you need to know. This was our team building robots after they taught us how to build droids. And they have droid parties. You go to the droid parties. You eat snacks. You share your droids. So the thing that my day job in TV and my dream job in books have in common is that I have a super curious brain, and I always want to be researching stuff and learning more stuff. My favorite type of shows are the ones where I do the most research. So I had to do the 1937 Olympics once, so we had Oscars. 1937 Oscars. So these were some of the reference photos, and then this was sort of how we recreated it. We took a little artistic license, but we recreated the 1937 Oscars. I recently did the new Muppet Show, which, as you know, that's an established show from the 70s, so we kind of treated it like a period piece. We had to look at old images, at old set drawings, and then we had to figure out how we could recreate what there was and bring it into this new version, this new Muppet Show set. Oh, it shouldn't be playing the sound, but there's the loud noises of the lights. So this was us remaking the Muppet Show. So all of that research was really good practice in TV, but I do a lot more of it for my nonfiction books. And so for the spider book, I get to read lots and lots and lots of books. I also got to go to the Natural History Museum in Los Angeles, where they have the Spider Pavilion. It is a giant tent filled with, guess what? Spiders. And everybody who works there, they think of themselves as Pokemon trainers, and they want to catch them all. So they are so good at spiders, they even taught me to love spiders, and I made a spider book. I wanted to learn about bees. I got a whole bunch of books in the library. I worked with professionals in the field like beekeepers, and I made a bee book. I wanted to learn about rocks, so I worked with a geologist. I read a whole bunch of scientific papers and books, and I made a rock book. I bet you guys see where this is going. You figured out the system, right? The system is, I get curious about something, I research that something using experts, using books, and then I share what I've learned. And I did not know until I talked to a science communicator at CERN in Switzerland that there was a job title for what I was doing, and that it is science communication. Science communication is just taking something that you've learned in the scientific world and sharing it with a wider audience. A lot of people do this and they don't even realize they learned something they think is cool, they see an interesting YouTube video, they read an awesome book, and then they start communicating that science to their friends and family. That's science communication. So I get to do this all over, which is pretty fun, and sometimes I bring a toilet paper cannon. But my newest obsession, the newest thing that I am researching the most, and it's all my neighbor Aniko's fault, is the brain. But not just the brain. I want to understand the brain's relationship with technology, and I want to understand why my brain specifically loves screens so much. I am wildly addicted to my phone. Why do I love that so much? All kinds of apps. Yeah, I could spend time on those. Video games. I play video games. Why does my brain get super excited about video games and much, much less excited about folding laundry? I want to know. Is there a reason? Can science explain it? So I'm talking to parents here, so we say parent primer. All of these really grown-up looking slides Aniko made, all of the really goofy looking ones are the ones that I made. You'll be able to tell. So first of all, when we're talking about screens and families, people start to feel judged, but we're so not here to judge you or scare you or tell you what to do. Our goal at Dopamind is just to arm you with a foundation of knowledge to help you and your kids make healthy tech choices for yourself independently. Whatever works for your family. Every brain is different, every family is different. There's no judgment. I get stuck to these things too. And in fact, this is just, if at any moment you feel judged, this was after Christmas. Notice, not only do I have my feet on the couch, but my child is like 3 inches from the television playing a game, and I'm just laying there. So no judgment, we've all been there. We like to think of it like food. Technology is a part of everybody's lives. Some people are vegetarian, some people aren't. Some people eat a lot of sugar, some people eat no sugar. It's different for everybody. So technology is a personal choice, and different people are affected in different ways. Also, media sensitivity. My kiddo is on the spectrum. A lot of, I have OCD, so I am especially tricky with media. I tend to get extra stuck to my screens. And then there's some kids who can see a screen across the room and they don't even notice it. My kid sees a screen across the room and he can't focus on anything else. So you're gonna have to know what works for and with your family, and I can't make those decisions for you, and I'm not gonna judge the choices that you make. Also, there's digital privilege. If I have $1 billion, I can afford people to entertain my children at all times. But sometimes I just have to do the thing where I put the kid in front of the TV, because that's my reality. So absolutely no judgment. So, digital wellness basics. This is a really interesting quote from an American biologist and naturalist. He says, the real problem of humanity is we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. One person said it's a bit like we are cactus in a rainforest. There's just so much coming at us. So let's start talking about the brain. Brain is super important, obviously. It is in charge of a ton of things. This is how I explain it to the kids. It's in charge of emotion, motor skills, thought, temperature, memory, breathing, touch, pretty much everything that keeps you alive. But I like to think that the brain has two main jobs. Number one, keep you alive. And number two, to motivate you to do the stuff you need to do to keep you alive. So, our brains have been doing this for a really long time. This is a 300,000-year-old skull from Morocco, and our brain size has been the same for 300,000 to 500,000 years. So, we're working with the same hardware we were working with when we were living in caves. So let's talk about cave people, right? These are our ancient ancestors, right? And their brains had to do those same two jobs. Keep them alive, motivate them to do stuff that keeps them alive. One of the things that kept them alive was being social, right? If you're staying together, you can share resources, you can scare off predators. Another thing that kept us alive was seeking out nature. You would go find new sources of food and water, you'd find new sources of shelter. Something else that kept us alive was eating and drinking. This sounds really silly, but if our brain didn't make this enjoyable for us, we weren't going to do it. So our brain does this with the help of a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And a neurotransmitter is just a fancy word for these chemical messengers in our brain. So we have all these cool brain cells, and they send messages to each other with the help of neurotransmitters and electrical signals. So when your brain releases dopamine, this special chemical, it can cause good feelings like pleasure, satisfaction, motivation, and joy. But how do good feelings help keep us alive? Well, when I was teaching my dog, Willow, we saw her earlier, to sit, I motivated her with treats. And our brains do something similar, using dopamine to motivate us to survive. Even since the earliest humans, brains have been giving us little dopamine rewards for doing important survival stuff. Things like eating, drinking water, socializing, exercising, and being in nature. So dopamine was motivating our ancient ancestors too. And now dopamine motivates us to do all the stuff that keeps us alive, right? Socializing, eating, and drinking. And if we think about how long our brain has practiced doing this, we only started even making boats 65,000 years ago. Think about where the cell phone came in. This is really recent. And now that most of us don't have to hunt for our food or run away from predators, we get dopamine from other activities too. In fact, whenever we accomplish, learn, or discover something new, our brain can reward us with dopamine. It's like a little reminder that says, hey, pay attention to this thing. This good feeling is good. You want this. These good feelings make us want to accomplish, learn, and discover more so we can get more of those good feelings. We call this the reward circuit. Now that humans know all about dopamine, we can actually design ways to get more of it. So people who understand how brains work can design their games and apps and videos and content to give us a lot of quick rushes of dopamine. And that will remind our brain to keep looking out for accomplishments, for discoveries, and for newness. And many times what you see on a screen has been designed to give you lots of these quick dopamine signals because that will keep you interested. So is this a bad thing? It can be. We like to think of our brains like computers because they do so many things, but we tend to forget that our brains are a living thing, right? And that living things need balance. We know that all plants need water, right? But too little or too much water can upset that healthy balance and make the plant not so healthy. So with dopamine, our brain's going to try really hard to protect this balance because it needs dopamine to motivate us to do that important life stuff, right? So I talked to it with kids like how I like to talk with kids. And I like to compare it to healthy food and junk food. So we all know there's healthy food and there's junkier food, right? More healthy, less healthy. So if you decide to eat cotton candy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, how are you gonna feel? I mean, your day might start out kind of awesome, but then you're gonna start to feel like crazy sugar rush, and you might wanna barf, and you might wanna cry. And when this is happening, you know what's happening because you've been informed about what sugar is gonna do to you. You know what you're in for, and maybe you made that choice, that's cool. But did you know that there's healthy tech and junk tech? So when you are using a technology that gives you a lot of quick dopamine signals, it can really kind of overwhelm your brain, and your brain goes into what some people are starting to call dopamine overload. So dopamine overload, you can think of it like a sugar rush, because it'll make you feel emotional, it'll make you feel angry, it'll make you feel like you're having trouble controlling your impulses, and this happens to everybody, it even happens to me, so there's no shame. Don't try and take my iPad, I will cry. So Dr. Anna Lemke, she's very cool. We have a podcast at Dopamind, and she let us interview her, which was really cool of her. But in her book, Dopamine Nation, she talks about good feelings and bad feelings being balanced in the brain on what she calls the feelings teeter-totter. So the feelings teeter-totter, on the good side of the feelings teeter-totter, we have joy, excitement, enjoyment. On the bad side, we have sadness, anxiety, and boredom. So your brain has to keep this balanced, right? Because feelings are part of how your brain motivates you. And if your brain can use dopamine to motivate you to do all the survival stuff, that's great. That's the balance that it wants to keep. Then it can motivate you to like drink water and eat food and stuff that keeps you alive. But when your brain gets too many dopamine rewards really fast from stuff like screen time, it tips that teeter-totter really far on the feeling good side. And while that feels really good, your brain cannot sustain that forever. So Dr. Lemke says this is like the brain sending little gremlins to hop on the other side of the feelings teeter-totter to help make it level. And before they can level it up, the gremlins really have to put their weight into it. So they're gonna tip that feelings teeter-totter more to the side of bad feelings. So it's gotta get a little worse before it can get better. And this is not your brain punishing you, it's not anything going wrong. It is actually your brain working exactly how it's supposed to work. It's bringing everything into a healthy balance and doing its number one job, keeping you alive by motivating you to do the stuff that keeps you alive. So I know what you're thinking, because I thought it too. Can't I just do all the high, quick dopamine activities forever and ever, super fast, quick dopamine, yeah? No, we can't do that, because your brain can't sustain that. It's a living thing, right? It needs that balance. We like to think of our brains as computers, but it is a living, growing, and ever-changing part of us. So too much dopamine too quickly, really it's about the quickness of the dopamine, how quickly you're getting it, because some things may not change the actual level of dopamine you're just getting it so fast. So this quick dopamine can lead to you having these really big feelings, and then as it's sort of leveling out, you're gonna have this sort of low dopamine feeling where you'll start to not feel interested in anything at all, especially in slow dopamine sources, which are all those things that keep you alive, like sunshine and food and water. So this makes me think of, when I talk to kids, popcorn at the movie theater. So do you ever notice, when you go to the movies, all you can smell is the popcorn, and then after a while, you walk around and you can't smell the popcorn anymore. You just get used to it. We call that becoming desensitized. So the popcorn smell hasn't gone anywhere, you've just become desensitized to it. You're not really reacting to it anymore. So something similar happens when you get a lot of quick dopamine from screen activities. Your brain starts to feel overwhelmed, and then it feels this need to protect you. It's got to protect dopamine. So you become a little desensitized. And you might notice if you're doing a lot of quick dopamine activities, suddenly it's just not that fun anymore. You're sort of swiping through your game, or you're doing your, like Candy Crush. That happened for me. I'm like, this isn't even fun anymore. Why am I doing this? Sorry, Candy Crush, don't sue me. So that's, your brain just gets a little bit desensitized. So I know what you're thinking. Can you see this slide again, because it's the greatest thing I've ever done? Yes, you may. You're welcome. Then you're wondering, how do you keep your dopamine levels happy so your brain is happy? And I'm here to help you. I have 5 tips. Number 1, recognize junk tech. So, like junk food, junk tech is best in moderation. I have a lot of cool versions here. One of the most important ones is no clear endings or stopping points, like endless scrolls or feeds. So our brains evolved all of these years, as we talked about, for sunrises and sunsets, and beginnings and ends, and life, birth and death. So when something doesn't have an ending, our brains get really super confused. And they become extra focused on this thing, and it becomes really hard for our brain to pull away. I noticed this. This is my husband, Mike. Look, he gets to be in the presentation now. Hi, husband. My husband, Mike, and I have known each other since college, and we like to play video games. And we noticed one time we got this game that did not have an ending, and it was turning us into tremendous jerks. So what the problem was our little brains that are used to, so many years of being in caves really didn't understand why this game couldn't end. So we made a house rule that we weren't allowed to play games that didn't have endings. And this was way before I even knew the science. This was us just noticing in our own home that it wasn't working for us. And then if we didn't stop playing these games, we were gonna be like in the news, found under piles of pizza boxes, like having not left our house for 6 months. It was gonna be bad. But thankfully there are lots of games you can get that have an ending, games that have a story, a beginning, a middle, and an end. You can buy the cartridge, and then you know that it ends. So our house rule is we'll get a game that has an ending, and then we can bring it back to the game store and you get credit towards future games. So that's what we do. Speaking of going to the game store, free games and apps, that's usually a sign of junk tech, because if the game is free, you are paying for it with your time and attention, which is totally fine, right? We have to pay the people who make games, but it is important to keep track of how much you're spending. I know that I spent $60 on Legend of Zelda, but how much have I spent on Instagram? Probably way more if I'm giving them as much time as I know I'm giving them. All of these apps right here, I have never paid for any of them, but I know that they have to pay for all of these people to make their games, and this isn't even a totally comprehensive list. So that's why they actually will bring in psychologists and behavioral science experts, and these people work on behavioral design or persuasive design. So this is the sort of design that knows how our brains work in order to make us want to keep using their app. Which doesn't make them evil, it just makes them, they want to pay for what they're doing. It just means that when we're aware that our attention is how we're paying, then maybe we won't pay quite as much. Here's one of Annika's pretty slides. Social media platforms and texting deliver ongoing dopamine rewards through lots of design tricks like free-to-play games and no clear stopping points. And then higher, quicker dopamine video games are usually connected online and don't have clear stopping points and deliver constant rewards and encourage social comparison, which can also be kind of addictive for us. This was my artistic representation of TikTok. I get really overwhelmed by TikTok. So that's what I feel like TikTok looks like. So these quick format videos, like the YouTube Shorts, the TikTok, they actually are extra tricky when it comes to being designed to distract us. They actually are sort of a behavioral training device we're learning from some more recent papers that have come out, honestly, in the last year, that they're kind of making us a little less, we have less of an attention span after doing a lot of short format video, and sometimes it makes us a little less creative and a little less easy to multitask. So if you were a bunch of kids, I would ask you to think about some games and apps that might be junk tech. That doesn't mean that they go away forever, it just means we're really conscious about how we use them, right? We're not gonna eat them all day long if they're junk food, we're not gonna use them all day long if they're junk apps. And then let's look at some games or apps that are brain healthier choices. I'm not gonna tell you not to FaceTime your grandma, do that all day long. But maybe don't watch 6 hours of short format videos. That doesn't seem like you're gonna feel great after that. Okay, rule number 2. So rule number 1 was recognize junk tech. Number 2, listen to your body. Your body's super smart, it's giving you signals all the time. If you feel like going into meltdown mode after certain games and apps, maybe your brain's telling you, this is a little much for me, I'm gonna need a break. If you turn into this, maybe setting timers or limits for your screen use can help you with dopamine overload. I have the little limits set on my phone. I also, when I'm working on a show and I really want to be able to have the brain space to work on the show, I will just delete all the apps off my phone. And then when I'm not on the show, I'm like, okay, I have a little more brain space right now, I will allow it. Because it's not like you can't re-download it, it's not forever, just taking little breaks. Now, Annika likes to remind the Goldilocks effect, not too much and not too little. If you're noticing sometimes it gets a little too hot, maybe that's too much. If you're noticing that it's not enough, that you're really feeling like you get something out of it, you could do a little more. and that keeping your devices out of sight, then they're out of mind. In our home, we have a drawer. You go in, and we put a little charging strip in the drawer. When my kids' friends come over, if they have a phone, we ask them to put it in the drawer so that they actually hang out together. And Aniko has like a really cute little box you put it in that has plugs in it so you can make it sort of a cute thing. Number 3 is take a break. Just like your finger can heal from a paper cut, your brain can reset to healthy levels after too much dopamine. All it needs is time. Every brain is different, but taking a break from screens for a few hours, days, or even weeks can help give your brain the time it needs to find a healthy balance. So we have a couple studies that show that if you take a 30-day digital detox, your brain goes back to baseline dopamine levels, like reacting to dopamine. And I like to tell kids that this is where you're getting joy from really ancient sources of joy, like noticing beautiful trees and noticing beautiful clouds. Like, there are so many sources of joy in the world that we have desensitized ourselves to because of the technology. And that doesn't mean that you can't get that back. You can get that back. And what's cool is a lot of kids will then tell me, oh yeah, I went camping and I felt so good. Well, yeah, you do feel really good when you go camping because you're getting all of your dopamine from these slow dopamine sources that feel pretty great. Oh, this one, number 4, balance with brain veggies. So natural sources of slower dopamine, they're like giving your brain the veggies it needs to stay healthy, especially exercise, sunshine, and playing in person with friends. Play is so, I cannot emphasize enough, important. All mammals play, and it is so important for our brain and body development. Okay, the kitties are so cute though, right? So important for the brain and body development. And okay, I have dogs playing too, just to keep it fair, dog and cat people. Our brains, our human brains, are really big, and they're really, really, really complex, and we have a really long childhood, right? And that is so we can fit in so much more of this superpower that is play. Here are my favorite animals at play. This is in front of my house from my front door. My son started the biker gang at his school, and now they all go outside and they just play. It's just wild children on our street. But this is so good. And what we have learned, actually Dr. Peter Gray has an amazing book on play. What we've learned is that this time before their prefrontal cortex is developed, before their amygdala is developed, if they have as much in-person play as possible, it's actually going to help them in so many ways. They end up being smarter, they end up being more independent, they end up being less anxious. Unfortunately, playing on screens is not the same. It doesn't give us all of the same sensory input, doesn't give us all of the same benefits we get from the play that our brains are used to and have been used to for all of this time. So you really got to get outside. We have a star chart with our kiddo. We try to get rid of it, and then he wanted it back. And one of the things on there, he'll do the star chart, and if he gets everything on it, he gets an hour of video games to redeem on the weekend. So this is just what we do. Nobody else has to do this. But there's a reading star, he can read for an hour. There's a chore star, he's got to do his chores. There's an activity star, and it's literally just, we're kicking you outside, go do stuff for an hour. And then there's a creativity star, go do something creative. And then, what's the other one? Exercise star. He has to do something exercising. Okay, and number 5, save it for later. Give your developing brain as much screen-free time as possible. So most phones and tablets, pretty much all of them, but I say most, are designed for adult brains. Tested on adult brains, meant for adult brains. Waiting to get your own device until your kid brain has had time to develop is a great way to be kind to your mind. So we're working with different hardware here, grown-ups and kids. 2 important parts of the brain that are maturing in adolescence are the amygdala, down there. It is important for emotional learning and behavior. And the prefrontal cortex, I call it the brakes of the brain. It's responsible for skills like planning, prioritizing, and making good decisions. So if it's hard for me to turn my phone off and I have my brakes developed in my brain, I can't even imagine how much harder it is for my 12-year-old. So save it for later. And even if you can't save it for later in life, saving it for later in the day is helpful too. Because if we're thinking about it like junk food, you don't want to start your day with the cotton candy, right? It's going to throw your whole day off. So what if you think of it like dessert? You are going to do your screen time after homework, after school, at the end of the day. But one more caveat, you're going to want to avoid screen time about an hour before bed. And that's because of our friend blue light. Have you ever been laying in bed and you're just watching all the things on your screens, and then your brain will absolutely not let you go to sleep, and it's like, gonna be golden, it just like keeps singing to you. That's what my brain does. So, that is because our brains, again, were developed to see sunrise and sunset, and to think, oh, this is light, I should rush outside and do important things. So we're confusing our poor little caveman brains with all of the light right in our eyeballs right before bed. But technology is everywhere, it's here to stay, and so are you. So now that we know how all of this works, and we can make awesome decisions, we can make sure that we're using technology in a way that makes our lives super happy and healthy. So then let's talk about some adult stuff, screen time and tech boundaries. We like to say less is more, later is better. You're gonna have your whole life to do stuff on screens. Most older people who have grown up with this wish that they did less screens when they were younger. I don't know, there's this awesome new book called The Amazing Generation, and they talk to a bunch of kids in their 20s, and they're all like, man, I really wish that I just hadn't had a cell phone until after college. There's a lot of remorse. So screen time, everybody asks, like, how many hours of screen time for my kid? Unfortunately, because brains are so different, nobody can decide on a consensus for exactly how much screen time, but here's a couple different ones. World Health Organization and the Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, they both pretty much agree under a year you're not gonna wanna do screen time. For toddlers, an hour or less. For little kiddos, 2 to 5 years, we're saying an hour or less per weekday. That kind of works with both of these here. And then children, 6 to 15, less than 2 hours a day. That book, The Anxious Generation, which is awesome. If you haven't read it, everyone should read it twice, by Dr. Jonathan Haidt. He wants to try and help everybody do these 4 new norms, just no smartphones before high school, because we're trying to protect that really amazing developmental brain period. No social media before 16. Again, developing brain, really vulnerable time, and social media can be pretty gnarly. Phone-free schools, because all of the research is saying if you even have a phone in your backpack or you're not looking at it, hugely distracting. And more independence and free play and responsibility in the real world so that kids know to trust themselves. Pacing technology slowly and gradually. Kids who receive their first smartphone before 13 are exhibiting significantly lower levels of mental well-being. The 13 plus age recommendation on social media, that's actually just because of the Children's Online Privacy Act from 1998. So this was enacted because companies wanted to gather data on people and through online activity. And they just picked an arbitrary age. They're like, yeah, 13, we won't gather anything from people under 13. So it's not based on like, what is healthy for a kid's brain. Also, the internet in 1998, you like turned it on at your one computer and it like screamed at you. Remember? I had that. So it's a totally different internet. So that 13 plus age recommendation really is not, I would wait longer, but that's just me. Again, maybe you're like, my kid's totally fine, Bethany, stop talking. Screen time. Oh, we like to say setting up device-free spaces, like I was saying, having a drawer or a box that you can put them in. And more important than the specific time is just your kid's reaction. If your kid's totally fine playing a game and then walking away and doing something else and there's no reaction, great, awesome, they're doing wonderful, no changes. But if they're turning into me and crying and want more of it, then there needs to be a change. One thing about underage smartphone introduction is people usually cite safety, and let's just say everybody's scared about school shootings, that's the thing that they're scared of. But crime rates have actually fallen dramatically. There is, in 2020, online crime against children increased 144%, so that's kids on phones. But in-person crime, it has fallen 71%. So Dr. Jonathan Haidt likes to say we're overprotecting kids in the real world and underprotecting them online. Surveillance parenting, I'm not going to talk about this, but I am going to say it's exhausting for us too. Like, we don't need to do it. We don't need to do it. So kid-friendly tech, an iPhone's a supercomputer, right? My father-in-law, he used to build computers when computers were just starting, and they would take up the entire floor of Bank of America, and he'd be there for like 3 months building one computer. And he likes to hold up the phone and say, this would have taken me 3 months and 2 floors of a building to build. So 87% of teens own a phone, even though Steve Jobs himself did not allow his children to have iPads or iPhones. So there's a lot of adolescent-friendly tech options out there. There are flip phones you can get. There are what we call dumb phones, phones that can't go on the internet. My son has that Bark watch. Someone was talking about a Gizmo watch the other day. These are watches that can just make phone calls to pre-approved numbers. That can make things easier. There are high-tech home boxes, or you can just, stick everybody's phone in one of those. Bark is really cool. We work with them a lot. We like them a lot because they made all their money on government contracts, creating programs that sort of find creepy people on the internet. They only make things for families because they have families. Like, they aren't really interested in all of our money. They're just doing it to be nice, so I like them. This is a cool thing you can put on your modem at home, and it can automatically shut down at certain times, certain things. Maybe you want at 10 p.m., nobody can access social media, nobody can access YouTube, nobody can access whatever. You could set that up from the Wi-Fi, which is actually pretty cool. Getting a home phone, it's the best. Get a home phone. You can give a number out, and then what's extra cool about this, your kid actually has to focus on a conversation, on the words that are coming out of their mouth. Instead of it being FaceTime, where my son and his bestie are just making faces or putting filters on themselves, they actually have to focus on what the other person is saying, which is pretty good. And then there's segmented tech. You could get one of these cool, I actually got one of these Hatch alarm clocks, and I would not recommend it because it's too fancy. It does too many things. I should have just gotten one. But you can get your own alarm clock. You can get it for real life calendar. You can get an e-reader for your library books. You don't need all of these things to come out of your phone. Other screen-free entertainment. The Mighty's kind of cool. It's a little expensive, but I do kind of want to get one. It is internet-free, but you can load your Spotify podcasts onto it and stuff like that. All right, so maybe you're looking for more stuff to do for a community, because it's hard to do this stuff alone, right? So the Balance Project is pretty amazing. They're nationwide, and they are just a way of getting together with your community and making sure that you're all on the same page about when are we starting our kids with phones? What are we asking our school to do about screen-free environments? So you're able to find other like-minded parents, talk about this stuff. Balance Project brings us as Dopamind into places. I've been really impressed with all the things that they do. Wait Until 8 is another pledge where you can join with other parents and say, we're not going to give our kids a device till 8th grade. We have these free things. We have a lot of free things on our website. It's dopamindkids.org. We have a first device readiness signs, and it's actually a little contract you can do with your kid. If you feel like they're ready for a device, then you can let them know what the expectations are, and they can sign it and be like, all right, this is an important thing. Let's make sure we're on the same page. We also have email templates. Let's say you want to request Dopamind to come to your school. Let's say you want to request your kid's camp goes device free. You can find our templates, and they will link to research so that you have science to have your back as you're explaining these things. And then, shameless plug, I have this book coming out in November. It explains a lot of these things that you just learned, so it's a nice way to take it home and share it with your family. Helping kids manage media. So number one, this one's tricky, but obviously modeling is huge. Kids are learning and watching what we do. I remember when my son was very small, he was probably 3, and he was sitting between Mike and I, and we're both emailing furiously on our phones. And he looked at both of us and then he sighed and said, I can't wait till I'm a grown-up and have a phone. And I thought, oh no. He thinks this is being an adult. This is what I've shown him. I was like, no. And I remembered that the reason I am a feverish reader is because my mother always had a book. She had an emergency book in the car. She had a book in her purse. She had a book next to the couch so she didn't have to get up. She'll go back to the couch book. She had a book by her bedside table. My mom made reading a priority, and she showed me that, so I said, oh no, I'm making this a priority. I need to make sure that I show him what my priorities really are. Now, I have a really busy day job, so I have to be on my phone a lot. So part of it is about explaining to him, hey, I have to use this tool right now, and it means that I'm going to be ignoring you guys in the real world, and I'm sorry because that's kind of rude, but I got to do this. So just try to be communicative about what I do. And I also ask my autistic kid, who will call me on it, to call me out if he thinks I've been on my phone for too long. He will say to me, Mom, did you fall in an Instagram hole? And I'm like, oh no, I did. He will let me know, and it's really helpful. If you have a 12-year-old, they can be helpful for that. We have this on our website too, some rules of thumb, like what is more junky and less junky. So communication, obviously FaceTime and phone calls, those are great. What's in the middle? A text or an email, one-to-one, a little more personal. But what's not as good is like a group text or a social post. Because you're just sort of throwing something out there, there's more social comparison, it's one-to-many, it's less personal. Same with visual media. Going and seeing a full story with a beginning, a middle, and an end, that's actually great. Humans have been loving storytelling as long as there have been humans. Shows that have a smaller story arc, okay, that's cool too. We like to make shows sort of a moment in our house. We don't like to do it while we're doing other things. But the least good, sort of the most junky would be that really short format video, like little 15-second videos. Video games, again, I said before, the game cartridge, something that is leveled, something that maybe tells a story. Better is an online purchase game, at least you're paying for it, so you already know what you've put into it. And a free-to-play game can usually be kind of the trickiest. For device use, having a family iPad, there's no perception of, this is mine, it belongs to me, I'm the boss of this. A little better would be a child phone iPad, at least it's not with them 24/7. And the most junky can be a child-owned iPhone because it can be a little bit tricky and they have 24/7 access to the entire world. And then news, she put daily news podcast that works really well for her family. My family would get the newspaper. We get the newspaper every single day. My dad is a newspaper guy. Any young people watching this, I'll have to tell you what the newspaper is. It is the internet printed on paper. But yeah, newspapers, we get it. My 12-year-old will go out and grab it every morning, and as he eats his breakfast, he reads the newspaper. It's pretty awesome. Better, she likes the news aggregator, so she can just make sure she's looking at the news that she wants. And then news from social media, obviously, sometimes there's all sorts. It's the Wild West, y'all. You don't know what you're getting. And then these are some popular video games that tend to be some of the most sticky. They're free to play, they're super, super powerful, they're super, super popular, and they're widely played by young kids. If your kiddo wants to play these games and you don't know how you're feeling about that, we usually like to say, go through Common Sense Media with your kiddo, because at least you can have the conversation, right? You can say, okay, Minecraft, cool, what does Common Sense Media say? It says 8+, and what are the reasons why it says it? Well, it says there are lots of products and purchases, it says there's some violence and scariness, so let's talk about that. If there was some violence and scariness, what would you do? So then, if you're deciding, yeah, my kid's totally ready for Minecraft, you're at least all on the same page and having a good conversation about it. Same with Roblox. I know a lot of really little kids like to do Roblox, but I like to show my son, dude, it says you should be 13+ for this game. That's not me. Blame Common Sense Media. That's what I'd say. And then it can explain. There's a lot of purchases. There can be some sex, romance, and nudity. There can be some language, like, will you come to me if you hear these things? Fortnite, same sort of thing. There's some violence. 13+ on Common Sense Media. It just makes it an easy way to have a conversation so you're all on the same page. We have these on our website. They show how to lock down things like YouTube and YouTube Kids. If you want to get rid of suggested videos, or if you want to get rid of algorithmic driven videos, we can walk you through that step by step. We have pictures like this on the website. You can pause your watch history. You can set the age of your child to approve videos only. We also, we have so much on the website. Aniko's a hero. We have more in-depth content. You can listen to a bunch of really good experts talking about things. And then we have these courses. That's Kelly. She's our other person in our trifecta of Dopamind. She joined us recently. She is the director of a preschool. And so she asked us to come in, and then she was like, actually, I'm going to join you. So she is part of our quest. But she can talk directly to the little kids and tell them a lot about what we do. If you want to get involved, there's a bunch of QR codes. And again, you can just go to our website. But that is us. We are Dopamind. And normally I would take questions, but I don't know if there are any questions. You do have a question. Okay.
So I myself do play Minecraft and some video games myself.
I play video games too.
I don't have any children, but I know that what your thought is of you do just kind of start to peter out on games that don't, Minecraft technically does have an end, but once you hit that end, there is more.
That's what everybody says. It ends when you kill the Ender Dragon. And I'm like, but did you stop playing?
Exactly. one thing that I know I do for myself is kind of set myself, like certain games, my brother plays a lot, he plays a game called Dreamlight Valley. It has a lot of quests and goals, and sadly when he runs out, he's like, oh darn, and he has to wait for an update. But I do notice that when I set like little mini quests for myself in games that are long-term, that it does help me to kind of like balance some of that. Same with like something like Stardew Valley.
So setting quests and limits sort of within the game?
Yeah, like
that's
to-dos
great.
or quests myself. Would you recommend something like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, every brain's different.
Yeah.
So the game that really got us was Destiny. Have you ever played Destiny?
Yes.
So that we became like trash people who wouldn't leave our house. It was bad. But I know like one of our best friends, he plays all the time, he plays with his son. They have no problem walking away from that game. But we were like, oh, there's different aliens. Nope, we gotta get those aliens. Nope, and there's a non-stop supply of aliens. So we couldn't stop. The game just kept giving us aliens to go after. So again, it depends on your brain. But yeah, setting little mini endings for yourself in there would help our brains that really like chapters and beginnings and ends and morning and night. Yeah.
So anything you're reading with, when you have a child who you try to take the device away, or you tell them it's time, and they can't. You know they're gonna melt down, you know they're gonna freak out. What can you do as a parent or a teacher?
Yeah.
Because it's school too. What can you do to help them with that transition?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know closing the lid is like the worst thing.
Well, so we were told, I mean, that's interesting, because we were told with one of the experts we were talking to was removing the device so it can't be seen is actually helpful because they start to like think about something else. And then finding a slow dopamine source, like drink some water, or let's touch some grass, or let's pet this dog. Allowing them to get a slower dopamine source can kind of help ground them. I wish I could remember which episode this is, but one of our podcast episodes, someone gave some really good steps, and those were the ones I took away, which it was like remove the thing, so you're not looking at the thing anymore, and then it's, hey, let's do this other thing that's gonna also be giving you dopamine, and it's slower, so that kind of sucks, right? You liked the really fast dopamine, but you're still getting sort of that balanced version. That was what was suggested to us that I thought was really helpful. I know in the classroom it's hard though, because you also have 30 other children in that moment.
Would things like puzzles also be something that is one of those slower?
Yeah, puzzles are slower dopamine. Drawing is super helpful. I used to do, when my little buddy was overwhelmed, I'd have him like draw like an overwhelming, like draw the monster, draw your feeling. And he didn't even like drawing, but he was like, yeah, I'll get her now. So that can be kind of helpful, just doing things with your hands. Because that's what we are, right? We're these creatures who've been doing these things all this time. And honestly, when I noticed that screens were too much for our little buddy, I was noticing, so Grandma got him an iPad. Look at you, Grandma. No, Grandma got him an iPad. Because she's the favorite. Everybody loves Grandma. And he would press the button and it would do what he says. And he would press the button and it would do what he says. And he'd press the button and then we'd put it away and he'd be like, Mom, do this. And I'd be like, no. And then it's, rah, because he had been taught you like action, reaction. And it was a behavioral training device. Honestly, he was learning this immediate instant gratification. And I thought, oh, no. This does not work for me. But I think that can be part of it, is just training them on more slow dopamine. Because once you get more comfortable with slow dopamine, that's where the growth happens, right? We have to be bad at so many things to get good at anything. And if we're used to, I want this thing and I press this button, then when we face the real world where we need to fail incrementally to get good at something, that's gonna feel even harder. So feeling in a safe space doesn't feel good. I don't like watching my kid have to fail, it's terrible. But honestly, putting him in the situations where he is willing to do that now, I'm noticing he's much less anxious. He was very anxious in 4th grade and 3rd grade, and he became much less anxious now in 5th and 6th grade as I've kicked him outside and been like, yeah, go knock on the kids' doors. I don't know, maybe they won't be home. Maybe that'll be embarrassing. And I'm standing by the door like, I'm the worst mom ever as he's going out. But I'm like, research says this is good. But it is, that slow dopamine build does really help, and then it makes it easier the next time. Because you know, okay, I'm gonna feel a good feeling again, even though they've taken this screen away, if that makes sense. Yay, brains. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for having me. For being with me.